to see everybody. This is amazing. Can you guys raise your hand if we've met before? I would love to see in this. There we go. Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, good to meet the new people. Good to be in touch with those whose paths mine has crossed before. My name's Nate Farrington, and I am a bass player in Southern California. Grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and eventually made my way to Curtis, uh, where I did my schooling. And after Curtis was over, came out to play in the LA Philharmonic bass section for a number of years. They had an extended substitute need at that point, and I was trying desperately to break up with my college girlfriend, and the opportunity to escape to the other side of the country was there and get some great experience and be a part of Dudamel's beginning with the Philharmonic. So it was a cool way to see not just what it's like to play in a professional section, but to have to show up day in and day out and manage a lot more than the nuts and bolts of bass playing, which I'm sure most of you understand is actually what holding down a job is really about. It's complicated, and you sit in these sections with people uh, and you see them more than you see your spouse, and you get to know things about them you never should know. But managing all of that becomes such an integral part of being in a group and being in an orchestra. And after all, I think that's probably the goal for almost all of you that have shown up today. Uh, Maybe it's not. Maybe in the end, that's sort of actually at the heart of what I want to talk about. My auditioning journey took me to a number of really important stages for some really important jobs. The principal of Chicago was runner up for that. It was runner up for the principal of the Met. Was runner up for the assistant principal of Philly. Um, and so figuring out a way to deliver my best when the moment called for it was a huge, huge part of my process. And I think it's a part of everyone's process. I think it's a dual degree. You go to school and you learn to play the nuts and bolts of the double bass or whatever your instrument is. I know we have some instrumentalists here uh, that aren't bassists. You go to school and you develop your musical ideas and you get better at your instrument. But the other thing you've got to figure out is how you're going to deliver under pressure. And so today I want to talk about the way that those two avenues come together in an audition moment. I think a really good way to start talking about it and something that'll benefit you all is if you've got a sheet of paper, um, and you can get out a sheet of paper. I think that putting down the hierarchy of this, putting down on paper something, a concrete outline based on what we talk about today, so that you can walk away and run the ideas for your next prep through this outline. I think that'll probably be one of the most helpful things that we can do today. Eventually, I'm going to be running a 8-week audition prep intensive around a couple of the auditions that are taking place in April and May. It'll be time for the San Diego audition and time for the Chicago Lyric audition. I know that Detroit is happening too, and that list was actually, I was talking to Jeremy about it, the principal of San Diego, and they actually had some collaboration, some cool ideas about making sure that their lists overlapped in a way that would give people the most access to those auditions because they're timed so close together. Um, but look, in the end, that course and what we're talking about today is basically designed to help you achieve the ability to deliver your best in the toughest moments. And I think it's a super timely thing to be speaking about because the Olympics are here, and I'm sitting in awe watching these people and maybe knowing something a little bit about what they're feeling after having given their lives to these very specialized pursuits that most of the time are in the dark in the world. No one's, I don't think, really following, downhill super G skiing most of the year, but it comes into these moments and the world watches. A billion people are watching these people for these 30-second, 1 minute, 5 minute, 10-minute intervals. And I think classical musicians understand those moments a little bit uniquely. And I know it's why I've been glued to the Olympics is because we too get out there for 5 minute chunks at a time, 5 to 30 minutes. If you're in the super finals and they want to hear the whole list. Um, but you've got this chunk of time where your job is to make a statement uh, about essentially the thing you've given your life to. And wrapped up in those moments are our personal identities, it's our relationships, it's the way we structure our life so that we can be there. We gave our childhoods to this thing, a lot of us, in a certain way to be able to be there in that moment. Your aspirations for the future and what the opportunity could mean in terms of your could mean in terms of where you're going to live and what you're going to do and how much you're going to make and where you can go on vacation. It's all wrapped up in those 5 to 30 minutes. And it's kind of a miserable thing to think about the weight of all of that on our shoulders, especially since, look, I think the Olympians in most of what they're pursuing are have a number in mind, a literal number, a finish line that they're going to cross and that they're going to see other people cross. And they're going to walk away with the understanding that they did not cross that finish line faster than the other person. So they do not get to win that day. Or they did. And it was a number that was in their mind that they understood and worked towards and something that they could focus on that is super small, super concentrated, and was going to lead them to the goal. And as musicians, of course, it's not exactly what we're doing when we go to audition, right? Like, what is the winning time for Helden Leben 9? And what is the what is the what is the winner done at an audition through their music that we could quantify um, in a concrete way that would leave us, understanding fully what happened that day. And it used to make me a little frustrated because I did want more definition in terms of the goals of all this. I wanted to have that finish line. And I think what I discovered throughout this whole process is that there is a finish line for us, and there is, auditions are a game of sorts, and they have rules, and there are specific goals that we can set for ourselves inside of auditioning to be more successful, to make sure we advance to eventually win the audition. But the truth of the matter is that what an audition becomes at a certain point is setting up a personal goal in our mind palaces and working towards this standard that's defined by our teachers, our experience listening to the music, the ideas that we've developed as players, and the relationships with other players. All of these things come together and help us form a very specific musical goal for each excerpt. And we set a bar in our mind for what we'd like to achieve inside those excerpts. And the truth is that in an audition setting, everything else other than that standard for yourself is out of your control. And that's a tough lesson to learn. Uh, but it also gives you an opportunity to realize that success at an audition is meeting your standard. And it's meeting your standard when the moment matters the most. And if you are continually working towards delivering the standard that you have for yourself on the day, the success at auditions will come for you as long as you're growing as a player, as long as you understand what those goals should mean and should be defined as. That's where success at auditioning really is. It's set the thing in your mind, go into your mind on the day and meet the challenge of what you're capable of delivering and walk away understanding how you did related to that. That's all we can do. Everything else is noise at an audition. And there's a lot of noise at these auditions. I think we all understand what that means. I mean, the the mind plays a huge part. The body is toasted by the time we're done with 8 weeks of crazy prep. You know, There's the people showing up at this thing that you've known since you were kids and you're intimidated by them and will they be there or what's going on or oh shit, this thing is running an hour late and I didn't expect to be as hungry as I am in this moment. All of those things are outside of your control. And what you're left with when you're sitting behind that screen and you're with your instrument is your personal standard and your personal goals and what you've done to make sure that they're going to be something that you can meet in that moment. And I think there's a great deal of control over those things, but I think that what happens is that the noise of the other things oftentimes speaks so loudly to us that it's hard to keep our eyes on the prize during those 5 to 30 minute chunks. And essentially, through years of toiling and doubting and wondering if I had what it takes, and pain and discomfort and some glory for sure, success, I decided that it was important for me to distill the process of what I learned and figured out for myself in this very rigid preparation process that I call build, prepare, and deliver. And look, I put myself through it every single time that I have something important to play, whether it's a recital. I put myself through it for a presentation like today. Um, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the discovery that there is you as a bass player in this equation, and then there's you as a deliverer, and finding a way to inform both of those things and have them meet up in the middle in that moment is what we're actually doing. And that requires a great deal of work on the bass side, and it requires a great deal of work on the mental side. And through Build, Prepare, and Deliver, it addresses all of those things in a timeline that I think takes care of both avenues equally and has given me the successes that I've had in my life have come definitely through that path. So in the end, we're trying to be the most effective version of ourselves in those 5 to 30 minute chunks. That's all we can do. And I believe there's a reliable way to prepare yourself to be just that when the time comes. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions that they have about what I just said, or anybody want to tell uh, a story about their most harrowing audition story? I would love to hear from people so that this isn't just a monologue all along. Anybody want to chime in at all? Anybody have a question? They can leave it in the chat. They can unmute and speak up. Who, for instance, is taking the San Diego audition? Is anybody here taking the San Diego audition? You can raise your hands. Okay. And who here is taking the lyric audition? People raise their hands. Yeah, 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 yeah. So we've got a number of people who are looking at that, which is cool. All right. So basically, look, we've got these lists. I'm going to share the list here I'm going to share the list for a second. This is the lyric list, right? We've got Adams and Berg and Verdi and Britten, Humperdinck, Mozart, Puccini, Rossini, Strauss, Verdi, all of it, right? Um, Over here, we've got the San Diego list, which is, I actually think I think it's a really cool list. I think it's about the right size. Uh, it's got a really nice, it's got a really nice breadth of what they're asking for. And what I wanted to do, I thought it'd be a cool idea to take this thing today. And are you guys familiar with these? Check this out. This is called a Menti. Can everybody see it? Um, so use the QR code, check it out, grab your phone, pipe in, and what excerpt are you feeling most confident about in what you're about to prepare? I want to hear about the glorious um, yeah, the feelings of people who are feeling really good about it. As you enter those, the cool thing about this is we'll start to see people's answers in the response, but the bigger it is, that means the more people there are uh, who have shared the answer, which is kind of cool. Got people putting in their answers. Let's see how it's working. We've got Rigoletto. All right, Beethoven 9. That's an interesting one. I Beethoven 5 is always tricky for me because non-existent. Sad face. Oh no. Oh, this is great. This is funny because this is such a personal thing in the end. Where do we feel comfy? Where do we have, and it's all informed, I think by our past experiences. You crash and burn once, and then the next time you do it, you're sitting there shaking just a little bit. And horn signal, cool. So the bigger it is, the more answers we've had for that specific excerpt. And it's interesting to me that like a clear there isn't a clear everybody's favorite or everybody thinks is easy here. I mean, Beethoven 5 kind of makes sense. Beethoven 9 kind of makes sense, right? Because they're just so ubiquitous. I mean, they're on everything we've ever done. So everybody spent so much time on them. Somebody's feeling good about Bruckner. That's a nice thing to hear. I feel like Bruckner is fairly common these days. He's really come into focus. When I started auditioning back in 2005, I did not see much Bruckner. And um, I feel like they've sort of come into focus in a really interesting way. This is interesting. Um, let's let's take a look. If we look at this differently, what if we go to who the what excerpt are you most intimidated by? Is there, let's see if anybody can, it's a different QR code, but I would love to see if something gets extra big here. All right, Mozart. Sure. Yeah, which one strikes the most fear into the heart of auditioners? That's the big. None of them. Love that. Who's got none of them there? I would love to see the raised hand on on that answer. I would love to understand how we've gotten to a place mentally. Seriously, like if someone wants to unmute and talk a little bit, I would be really interested. Are you guys able to unmute? I think you should be in control of that. So anybody who wants to pipe up is welcome to. I'd love to hear from somebody who is feeling extra confident about one or extra intimidated by one. Does anybody want to speak about it at all? This is interesting because we've had like a smattering on both of them, right? It's not like anybody's just saying, Heldenleben is what I live in fear. It's not humongous in the middle. There's Mozart, but I guess
Hey,
Mozart.
can I chime in here?
Please, please, Ike.
Um, well, I hadn't finished putting them in yet, but for the ones that I'm intimidated by, um, it's the ones that I was asked to play again
Mhm.
on the last lyric audition,
Sure.
which was the Adams Dr. Atomic solo,
Yep.
and the I don't know if the Rossini La Cenerentola is on it, but there was that one. Um, and there was one other. It was the Wagner Siegfried, I think Act, what is it, two
Well, let me ask
opening.
you something. Let me ask you something, Ike. Was it intimidating because it it made you doubt what you had put forth in the first place? Like, what was your attitude when you were asked to play something a second time?
Um, so I felt so I was asked to do it and to be aware of on one of them of my breathing.
Oh, interesting.
So I was clearly breathing audibly and having to like address something like that in the audition. It's like, okay, I'm only thinking about this now. And then so I felt like um, it was just something like it just drew attention to something else, that um, I think just sort of I guess disoriented me like in that moment, like just but ultimately I did, and it was okay, but
Look, I think what's interesting about what you're saying, Ike, is that it admits that there was something about them trying to affect your playing in that moment that made you either self-conscious about your playing or self-conscious about your body or unsure of what your musical goals were in that time. And I think it's an interesting moment when a committee asks for something different or to be played differently than it was before, because it is not necessarily a referendum, a negative
A
referendum.
negative referendum.
Um,
mhm.
in the
In
end,
the end,
I think that it's oftentimes actually an admission of interest in you, because the truth is that those committees are completely free to take your idea, digest it, decide you're not the one for them, and move on. .org. And so if they're asking you to play again, there's a desire on some level for them to engage with you and your ideas. And it can be difficult to switch up your delivery at that point, but hopefully you've informed your preparation of those excerpts in a way that gives you a chance to divert a little bit of the power, from the it's like in Star Trek, right? We're going to divert from shields on our original idea and we're going to put it over here and into thrusters and try and make a pivot. And it's such a neat moment in an audition for an audition committee too, when somebody does that effectively and they show how capable they are. Because look, I think that an important thing to admit about this, and something that I was alluding to earlier, is that in these audition scenarios, it is as much about finding the right match of a player for the culture of an orchestra as it is about anything else. And obviously, to be considered for that, your playing has to be up to a certain standard. The in tune, in time, dynamics, all of those things uh, have to be at a certain level. But the truth is that what it comes down to most of the time in terms of these finals is them finding the right player. They're looking for apple pie and they want a nice big slice of apple pie. And I think a lot of times you get fabulous players who no one can argue with their playing along the way in an audition. They get to the super finals and they're cherry pie, and it's not going to work there. It's about being who you are in those finals and giving them a view of who you are and putting your ideas forward and then sitting comfortably in the fact that you did that and letting them make a decision about what's right. And it hurts so much because it takes so much effort to get ready to do that. But that is what real auditioning is in the end, is a back and forth. It's a conversation between you and a place you want to work. And it's an interview. Unfortunately, we do almost all the talking on our side of the screen, but it's meant to be something that it ends up being collaborative, even if in an odd way. And so I think you've got to look at those moments where they ask you to do something differently as a neat confirmation that someone's interested, as a neat way of understanding um, that they want more from you. They want to hear more from you. They want to, they want to figure this out. See if you're the guy. So in the end, I love it. Bartok is on here as one of the most intimidated. It's looking fairly big. I think that's interesting, and I would guess, I don't know if any Bartok fearful people want to chime in. I'm assuming that mostly has to do with that mostly has to do in the end with unfamiliarity. Uh, I don't know for sure, but I think that a lack of familiarity with certain excerpts that show up a little less often than other ones is totally natural, totally normal. Um, who's afraid of Bartok? Anybody want to talk about specifically why? It's totally fine. I mean,
Yeah, I'll
yeah,
chime in.
hit me.
I guess specifically like I get psyched out in auditions by quiet excerpts
Totally.
because I'm a little fearful sometimes of like bow shakes and stuff like that. Um, I don't know.
Can I ask you, Avery, what do you feel most confident about in your playing right now as an auditioner who's out and about? Like, what are you feeling good about when you go and sit down behind that screen these days?
Mainly the standard excerpts, I would say.
Okay.
Um,
So you feel like you have a grasp of the excerpts that are called most often, but you have a fear sometimes of the way that your body is influenced just by the situation itself.
yeah,
Totally.
basically.
Totally. And then and we feel like oftentimes that is something that's coming into our audition from the outside. It's this thing, even though it's coming through our body. I mean, it's chemicals inside your body that are making you shake. But um, but we feel like, oh shoot, this wasn't there and now it's there and it came in when I was under the pressure. And what do I do when I have to confront this thing that invaded my audition? And look, I think this actually segues really perfectly into sort of an explanation of the three of the three tiers of what I believe a great preparation should have. Um, Essentially, the system is called, as I mentioned, 15 times already. It's called build, prepare, and deliver. And it starts with build. Build is um, who you are as a bass player, what you bring, kind of what you just said, Avery, that like you feel like you have a nuts and bolts understanding of what the strokes are going to be and what the basic excerpts are calling for. Build is your capability level, no matter where you are in your bass journey. This is my ceiling. This is the strokes I've got. This is who I am as a bass player. And the cool thing about build is the better you get, the higher that level is when you enter a prep. Obviously, the easier it becomes to make decisions, inform your excerpts, right? And the other cool thing about build is that throughout a process, everything that you do circles back and informs build. Like you will grow as a bass player when you give yourself to an audition prep. I don't care if you're the most experienced auditioner. I don't care if you're the most successful auditioner. Going through a serious audition prep grows you as a bass player if it's done healthfully and intentionally. So then we take what we've got as builders and we move on to preparing the excerpts. Prepare is about the specific list. You've got all these pieces that are on there, and your job is to take what you've got as a bass player and load them into these excerpts. And I think this is a really interesting place that people fall down. They fall down for a number of reasons. There's a ton of resistance when you're not confident about your strokes. There's a ton of resistance when you're still developing the build side, when you're still making decisions about what you believe a Mozart bounce really sounds like, or what a heavier bounce sounds like, or how to play softly in a way that lets your body be relaxed enough to not shake even when you're feeling your most nervous. All of these things are part of the prepare process and they bog us down. I think a lot of people, I don't know if you guys would agree, feel free to raise your hand, but I think a lot of people think of that's exactly what an audition prep is it's informing those excerpts to the best of your ability, like getting your stuff in, getting reps in, and getting those decisions made. But I think it's a lot more complicated than that. I think that the prepare phase is twofold. One is you've got to take that list and you've got to look through that list and decide where every single excerpt on that list is going to fit in terms of your overall presentation. And I don't mean amorphous decisions on this. I mean specific musical goals inside each of these excerpts achieved by specific technical feats that you outline, identify, practice. All of those things uh, are what helps organize a list into a larger presentation. And I think it's super important that when we talk about prepare, that it really digs into minutia and creates, as I alluded to earlier, creates a bullseye that is super small and is the thing that you are focused on when you go to deliver. The other thing that I think is left out of the prepare phase, and I think this is really the thing that I'm most excited to talk to you guys about is the mind's role in all of this. And I think that a successful audition prep begins to address this much sooner and much more, it confronts it much more on the nose than a lot of people talk about. Um, the mind is on stage with you. The mind, your mind and you are out there together. And it's this really interesting thing. It sounds, of course, it sounds on the nose. Of course, it sounds like that's a no-brainer. No pun intended. But the truth is that I believe that that mind has a voice in your body, Avery, and that what's happening in those moments with your shaking, and in those moments where when the shaking starts, you're bailing on thinking about your specific musical goals because you're consumed with making sure the shaking stops. I mean, to me, that's actually the bigger problem in that moment than anything else, is not the shaking itself. I mean, people shake and things get weird in our sound from time to time, but the truth is it's the fear that is amplified in that moment in our bodies that takes over our mind and takes our mind off of the middle of the bullseye for those excerpts that you're actually on when you start shaking. And so it becomes this like feedback loop of upsetness, and sometimes bucks us off the horse and sometimes costs us dearly at auditions. But look, the mind is a huge issue in auditioning. The mind doesn't like being under pressure. You can't talk to it directly either. You can't just tell the mind something. You have to show the mind, and you have to let the mind accept. And what you see along the way is the mind trying to wriggle free. You see, I've had audition preps where I I started not feeling good in the middle of the prep. And, if your health is an issue, then this audition doesn't matter that much. And the pressure of it's not that big a deal. And yeah, we won't be able to practice that much, but at least we're addressing the thing that really matters in our life in terms of health. Turns out totally fine. Absolutely nothing wrong, but definitely had manifested some symptoms of like something that was bucking me off the horse of bearing down and continuing to concentrate and become essentially meaningfully prepared. I've had it make excuses with regards to romance. I think this is a super common one that people get into. I've had many students who find that their romantic drama tends to happen right at the most important moments in an audition prep. And, I'm telling you, the mind will find a way. And then you realize what it is, and you tell the mind, no, no, I'm going to keep you under control, and we're going to do this thing. And it finds a new one that you didn't understand before. But it doesn't like to be under pressure. But the interesting thing about it is that it is also the thing that will help you get through the pressure more than anything else. If you can work with it and help it to digest what its role is, then, I don't think anybody ever gets truly comfortable during auditions. I've had auditions where I gained a head of steam, and by the end I was feeling pretty confident, but it was not a comfortable moment. It's never it's a fight or flight situation for everybody every time that they do it. And so it's not, in the end, I don't think, about finding a way to get rid of the discomfort while you're playing, but instead finding a way to make sure that through whatever discomfort comes, your ideas and that bullseye that we're talking about inside each of these excerpts are what remains central in your thinking and what remains at the heart of what you're trying to accomplish there. And if that takes place, that is success at an audition, because it doesn't matter what you feel like while you're delivering. What matters is what comes out of your base while you're delivering. It matters what they receive from you in those moments. And so to me, what that's about is getting in those excerpts, knowing exactly where I'm going to place those excerpts on my list. I'm going to have my cubbyhole of what each one does for us. I'm going to make sure that my goals are very specific, show exactly who I am, show what my ideas are for a great sound. And look, we're all different. I've played in the bass section of almost every major orchestra in America: the New York Phil, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, LA, Seattle, National, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Columbus. And you go into each of these and you realize that the beating heart of all of these orchestras is very different. It's very different. Cleveland is a Ferrari. It's making incredible music because everyone is in perfect lockstep together in the best hall maybe in America, and the thing can pivot and the tolerances are like it's like a Swiss watch, you know? And Philadelphia is like a Mack truck. I'm not ever sure we're ever fully together ever in the Philly orchestra bass section. But what you have is space to make your phrase and spin your music. And you feel like this incredible, like breadth of opportunity that everybody around is listening and no one's going to leave you in the dust and you can be yourself while you're making music in that section. And you've got to find through the audition process where you fit in and what your ideals best fit in on. But make no mistake, these orchestras have perspectives and are all a little different. And all you can do in the end is find a way to go be yourself in front of them the most successfully when you're auditioning. And the mind is it. And I believe in an audition prep, you got to start addressing that mind halfway through. It has to be a thing where you are turning away from your being consumed by the nuts and bolts of this stuff and start trotting out your playing in front of people that make you meaningfully nervous, people that matter to you. And we start obviously with a low level of that, you know, a colleague that you have a lot of respect for, somebody that maybe there's a little bit of professional aspirations there, like you want them to get you a gig in the future. It doesn't really matter. But what we start doing at about 4 weeks in an 8-week prep is we start playing for people every 3, 4 days, 5 days. And it's going to step up in volume each time you do it. To where by the end of this thing, you have practiced auditioning and you've practiced feeling what it feels like to be under that pressure, and you've noticed what your body is doing under that pressure, and you've had a conversation with your mind. Each time you do a mock, I think you need time to digest. You trot it out, you take 2 big steps backwards. It doesn't feel like it was your body while you did it. Oh shoot, do I still have it? Is this going to be okay? That's my first mock audition. 2 big steps back, no matter what. It's always awful. And then I take 3 days and I dig in on the specific elements of the specific music making that I had planned for those excerpts that didn't work. And I dig in on those and I focus on those. It is not just about continuing to rep. It's about looking at what didn't make it under pressure. Then you trot it out again. And this time it's for somebody that makes you a little more nervous, but you're weighing it against your standards and your ideals for what the thing should be. You're not weighing it for an overall, oh, I played pretty well, but I was a little nervous. It's like, no, this crescendo and this stroke were not working in there and I couldn't get them out, and it's because I was feeling this, and these are the things I can do to address it. And you fix those things. And of course, you're going to get great information from the people that you're playing for along the way through these mocks. But I believe at the heart of these mocks is mostly an opportunity for you to be working on self-analysis of how you were able to meet your standard. And it's cool because you're going to get great information from the people that you love and the people that love you and want to help you and are listening to you. So you can always take tidbits and inform, and it may solve a lot of problems along the way to do them. But it's very much also about proving to yourself over time that you can do this thing under pressure. And that's hard to do. For me, when I started this process, it was just about, playing for a guy in the Philly orchestra bass section that made me nervous. And then by the end of it, maybe I played a mock audition at school that Hal had set up, but it was in front of all of the guys in the section. And that was the whole journey. By the end of my recent auditioning, I'm not as nervous as I used to be in front of the old people. And so I've had to step it up. I sent that little letter to you guys about what I had to do for the Met audition. And look, I played for everybody I could, and I realized that these excerpts were brand new for me. I'd never played them in competition before. I'd learned them over the course of a 7-week prep, and I was like, who is going to get me the most nervous that I can possibly deal with on this? And I was playing a week with the LA Phil, and so I just marched up to Dudamel and asked him. And look, the mock audition itself is super important part of that. But what's also important is getting your courage up to go ask him, and sitting there and not knowing if he's going to actually be available, and having to sit outside his audition and then get up early that day and pack up your bass and travel and go sit in somebody's weird, you know, home studio, or in this case, in his office next to him, and he's 3 feet away. And, all of that is the value of the mock as much as anything else, because it is a set of circumstances that your mind is having to digest. And you can tell it you're ready, or you can tell it you did your prep all you want. But what you want in the end is the mind to truly, deeply understand that no matter what these circumstances are, you want to prove to it in the end that you are going to be able to put your musical ideas forward, and that it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be all right. Um, you're going to make it through this thing together, and the eye can remain on the prize no matter what you're feeling. And so, it's interesting. And I think for everyone, depending on where they are on their journey, setting those up to be successful is super important, and can be for a whole different array of people. In the end, I think it's one of the most important parts of this thing to get that up and happening early in the process. And nobody gets it up early enough, and it's tricky business. Anybody have any questions about that? Anybody have any comment? Like, who has a story about their process and when it's worked or hasn't worked? Does anybody want to share?
I have a story if you wouldn't mind.
I'd love to hear it.
Yes. So first of all, thank you for all the information that you're sharing about this. I've, recently been grappling with just getting as many mocks in as I can and playing for people who sometimes frankly just don't want to listen, or it feels like they're carving time out of their day, right? And so that's a whole nother layer of almost ironic nerves on top of it. When I was prepping a competition last year, I mean, I got an ex-girlfriend of mine to come and listen to me run, because I'm like, what could be more nerve-wracking than that? What could be more, in some cases, undesirable, right?
Yes.
One of the questions that I have, or I guess question/comment, is I'm sure you're familiar with David Moore's concept of raising your floor as much as your ceiling.
Of course.
And this is something that I've recently been not only experimenting with, but also experiencing in, like, I had an audition on Sunday, for example, where it didn't feel like my ceiling, but compared to the past couple times that I had taken this audition, the floor was definitely much higher.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm alluding to with that is, even in the moment when you feel like it sounds kind of crappy or something's not working, or miss a couple shifts, my bow gets stuck on the string in Hofner, whatever, right? Those are just specific examples. Is I've noticed that usually listening back, especially with recordings, but also thinking back, it sometimes sounds a lot better when you listen back several days later. I
Oh,
know
and
people who
it's
have recorded
so
themselves.
true. It's so true. And
Yeah.
what you
Can you
find,
talk about that?
yeah, this goes back to the statements I was making earlier about how the mind is not always your friend in this situation. The mind is under pressure and wants to be somewhere else, much like your ex-girlfriend potentially in the mock that you played for her. It is trying to wriggle free. And so you realize that you have to work with this thing, but that you also have to wrangle this thing and impose some boundaries on it. And what we're talking about in the end, when I say delivering your best under pressure, what we're really talking about is a meeting of your floor and ceiling. The floor and ceiling of your bass playing will define how you do that day. I don't think anybody ever gets, certainly what we're practicing for are the days where our bass playing isn't exactly where we want it to be, and bringing the level of that moment up to a place that we can still be proud and still make the music that we want to make, right? Because on the days where it's just your day, stuff is flowing. And I don't think that it takes one of those days where it's just your day to win. I think that it is this notion of bringing the tolerances together through this process, through wrangling your mind, through meticulous preparation of the excerpt ideas, not just until they're sounding good, but repping them and defining in a way what a successful one of these is for each people. It actually leads me to my next little slide, which I'm excited about. This is an interactive thing. Like, people, please feel free to chime in. But I call this, just a second, bringing it up. Here we go. I call this, Zoom. There we go. All right. I call this buttoned up to beefy, right? And so what I did is I took the San Diego list just as an example here, and I put the pictures of each of the composers that are on this list. Um, Bonus points for anybody that can tell me who this is. Anybody know who I'm circling right here with my cursor? Can everybody see my cursor? Oh yeah, Wyatt. Wyatt, who is it?
Bruckner.
Who is it?
That's Bruckner.
It's Bruckner. Yeah, that's an old raisined up Bruckner there, but he's doing his thing. We've got Bartok up here with his big crazy eyes. Strauss is down here. But the truth is that in a great audition prep, you're making decisions not just about like, I think everyone can agree, like Mozart's coming over here towards the consommé, right? Towards the clear broth that is less complicated in terms of the sound, clearer, easier to see through, easier to hear the specifics. There's not a lot of kidney beans in our Mozart. And then over here, I think everyone probably on this call would agree that Strauss is sitting over on the beefy side, right? And it's not hard to make the statement that like most of this stuff will fit in between that playing. And there are other composers like Haydn and certain things that show up from time to time on a list that might expand the boundaries of this a little bit. But really, basically, what you're doing is looking to understand where you're going to fit everything in between. And so, like, I think we could all agree, like, Beethoven 9 ends up being pretty beefy, right? Like when you think about the bouncing that you're doing in Beethoven 9 versus something like Strauss, like that's juicy bass playing. So Brahms comes after Beethoven in time, and it's also super juicy romantic music. It's further on the romantic spectrum than Beethoven is. So my question for you guys is Brahms more beefy than Beethoven? Like in your estimation, what do you think? Who's got an answer? Feel free to chime in. Different beefs. I love that answer. That's great. It's true, but in the end, you've got to have a real perspective on specifically where you're going to put these things. Like just saying, I mean, where does Bruckner fit in terms of your Beethoven sound, your Brahms sound, and your Bruckner sound? Like it's coming from a similar era, specifically similar, I think it's pretty closely related, like pretty clearly like grew out of Brahms. And Brahms certainly grew out of Beethoven. So they're all cousins, right? But like this Owen says that there's more beef on the front end. Brahms got more beef on the end. Look, all that's fine. And I think that the nuance that you're talking about is really important, but it is your job in an audition prep to have a serious defined answer in your choices, in your musical choices about where these things are going to fit and how you're going to affect your playing to show them that, look, when it's time for me to play Beethoven, this is the sound I use. These are the bounces that I use. This is the culture of my Beethoven. And this is the culture of my Mozart, and it's pretty darn different than my Beethoven. Now, my Brahms, if they'd asked a different excerpt, maybe my Brahms can move on to either side of this Beethoven, but this is the excerpt that they asked. It's letter E. I'm going to play it juicy, but I'm not going to be sort of making the same top end, juicy, long, heavy bounce that I do in my March in Beethoven 9. And there's arguments to be had all over the place on these specific excerpts for these things. It's just dependent on who you are as a player and what you want to do. But I'm telling you, so many people end up with this right here as an issue. And the decisions that they make along the way don't define their larger offering in a way that makes it super easy for the orchestra and the orchestra players to be sitting back there thinking like, this person knows exactly what they're about. They've thought this thing through. They're showing us an incredible range of styles. They have great musical taste across these genres. Like, it may not be the way I want to play Bruckner today, but it's clear to me that based on the breadth of what we've seen, this person can do whatever we want them to do. The very least, let's give them a trial. The most, we're going to hire them on the spot. Like, the more you can unravel that and put Beethoven here and Mozart right here and Bach down here and have them fill in the grid of what you're capable of showing, an overarching presentation, I think the more successful you're going to be. And that is part of the prepare process. Identifying those things early, front loading decision making, and goal setting with regards to all of that. That happens early in a prep, and it's something you're working towards immediately. And then you're just spending the rest of the time testing against that. And if you can do all that, then we get to, of course, the deliver, and you get to win all the medals. Do you see down here? Ono has all his medals, and those will be yours because you have developed those personal standards and worked to deliver towards them. Who's got a question? Who anybody else want to share a tale of woe or a tale of success? I know it's tough. Group therapy is daunting, and but I think this is a safe space. I can't guarantee because there's so many new names. But does anybody have any questions for me? Who wants to ask? You've got me right here.
Yeah, Nate, this is John. I have a question. Thanks again for doing this. I'll echo everyone else's sentiment on that. I have a question more about kind of what you're getting your mind right. You mentioned that in your preparing phase, like for auditioning and setting, you said like kind of starting to get that going a little bit earlier in the process because everyone kind of probably generally forgets about that when you're, preparing the excerpts. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on what that looks like for you?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned before, it's interesting because I think you can have direct conversations with your mind in terms of that preparation. And the direct conversation with that mind comes through zooming in on musical goals inside specific excerpts as quickly as you can, and then repping slowly and intentionally repping excerpts over and over and over again, working on the strokes that you want, but then also making sure that you're getting through the full excerpt. And that's what I'm spending weeks 1 through 3 doing. And I think inputting that into the body is speaking to the mind initially. That getting those reps in, getting them in a way that's healthy and builds a real intentional plan is like putting the information into the computer. And then we're going to ask the computer to digest that information over the last 6 weeks, 5 weeks of a prep. And what you want to be doing is making sure at the beginning that you're putting that in as intentionally as you can, that you're putting it in as detailed, in as detailed a manner as you possibly can. And that is the beginning of the process. The interesting thing is that the mind's voice back to you in this is oftentimes in the form of resistance. It's also oftentimes you hear it most loudly when you're actually doing those mocks. So giving the mind a voice in this process is terribly important. And I think that's interesting, the back and forth of it, right? Because they know that just thinking through, there's cognitive science, there's behavioral science that shows that there are literal neurons and pathways in your brain that are developed when you sit and think about taking that audition in your mind. When you're going through those excerpts with that intentionality in your mind, it is digging neural pathways in your brain. They're sure of that. And so what we're talking about is the role of intentionality early in a prep. And then we get the thing on our feet and we start testing it out in public. And what you're getting during those mocks is feedback from your mind. You're playing for those people. You're hearing, this didn't work, this didn't work. It's not quite in there the way I thought it was, or we need to make a different plan to achieve what I thought it would. And hopefully you are reassuring it along the way, hey, I'm on it. Like I heard you loud and clear. I've addressed what you were talking about. That's what you do in between each of the mocks. And then with intentionality, you go test it again under a slightly more rigorous circumstance. And you build this conversation until you're at the end and until you're at this place where, like, look, mind, it's time for you to get in line. We're going to do this thing today, and we are ready for this thing. I have been in touch with you. You know, now it's time for us to do this. And the mind is feeding back. It's like, look, I'm not thrilled about being here, or I am thrilled about being here, and we're ready to go. And now it's time to deliver. Like, let's get through this together. And I think that's the whole journey. Jason asked, there are dozens of musical decisions you can make in an excerpt. Can you give an example of what sorts of goals you're taking into an audition room? How distilling these decisions into something you can focus on in the moment? Absolutely, Jason. And that's a great segue. I think that those goals, at least initially for young auditioners or even experienced auditioners who haven't dug in this way, are built through the large cultural installation of bass playing. The truth of the matter is the bass community is super unique in the audition space, super unique in the orchestral space, right? Like there are people talking about excerpts in the bass world. Excerpts are how you're going to make your money in the bass world. Like you go be a jazzer if you want. It's difficult to sustain your life as in such a reliable way as what orchestra jobs will offer bass players in the other arenas of bass playing. So, you're going to have to interface with these things, and there's lots of people with lots of ideas on how they are. So there's these boundaries of the culture of each excerpt. You can go to Hal and get his take. You can go to Dave Moore and get his take. You can come to me and get my take. They're all born from our experiences. They're all born from our understandings of what's playing well and not doing well in auditions. And they're all constantly in flux as people figure out new ways to attack certain excerpts. And as just the zeitgeist of what's going on in the time uh, allows for. A great example of this is Beethoven 9 recits, right? Like you could go totally romantic with that, and you could push and pull and take time in interesting ways and take your articulations and acknowledge fully through your rendering of that the romanticism of what Beethoven 9 represents. Or you could decide, look, this is the bridge between romanticism and classicism, and we're going to organize a little bit of push and pull that shows we know it's vocal in nature, alongside articulations that sort of harken back and a timing organization that sort of harkens back to the classical side, a little wink to Mozart in there. And you come to Hal or Dave or me or any of the people that are inside your resources list, and you say, listen, this is what I'm thinking. What are you guys seeing out there in the world? And it's their job to have perspectives. It's our job to have perspectives on these things and work through those decisions with you. But what's important is identifying that culture that you're going to see inside each of the excerpts. I think it is probably done through guidance. It's done through listening. It's done through deciding that it's okay for you to have a perspective on it. Not to say that once you have your perspective, there won't be a referendum. There will be a referendum behind that screen on whether your perspective is really working or not. But it is absolutely unequivocally your job to have a perspective on those answers and to be intentional in trying to display them at your audition. In fact, what I've said over and over today, maybe not so bluntly, is that that's all you can do in an audition is put those things on display. So the more detailed your plan and the more detailed your ideas, the better off you are. And then you work your technique towards getting better at doing that. So any other questions? Anybody got any more?
I have another question.
Sure.
So we've been talking a lot about what it's like to be on the bass throughout your process. Can you talk to me a little bit more about rest, like where you calculate that and around what time in the prep you might start to plan days off? The most recent audition I took, I got a stomach virus. So I lost 2 days of prep the week of the audition. And then, so the day before the audition, I was only able to get maybe, 40 minutes counting scales and like general technique work. And then whatever time I had to warm up on the day leading up to it. So
Totally.
I've been working a lot with the idea of getting as many grooves, as many neural pathways developed for execution with as little time on the instrument as possible. So that way, if something like that happens, the muscle memory is engaged.
Yeah,
Still.
look, I think Owen, that it's a tremendously important topic when you're talking about bass auditioning in particular. It's a huge instrument. The damn thing will wear your body down no matter how efficient you are and how great your technique is. Like it's just something you're taking on as a bass player. It's like football and CTE, unfortunately. But I think that there's a tremendous amount of neuroses that infiltrates a lot of people's preps. A lot of practicing to practice, a lot of a lot of intensity around the edges that might have been better spent going for a run that day. And that the way to control all of that is, as I mentioned, through intentionality in serving specific goals. If you're in the first 3 weeks of a prep this way, the goal is to nail down your fingerings and your bowings. Even if you've done it before, it's to go through those things again and to nail down what your ideas that you're going to specifically execute in each of them are, and to rep the techniques that you need to, and rep getting through those things a number of times so that it's fed properly. Once you're done with that, you'll walk away. You don't practice until you've run your hands and fingers into the ground. And the problem with an 8-week prep, even if you're being intentional that way, is it's still going to wear you down. Just being on the instrument that much wears you down. And so I do think you've got to build in rest, and you've got to be comfortable with the idea that that rest is serving your audition as meaningfully as any time on the instrument at that point in time could. And look, if you've got a situation where the rest is making you feel like I'm messing up my whole prep here because I'm not ready and I should be on the bass, then we probably should have started earlier in the prep, and we can affect that for next time. But what we're trying to do here is give ourselves a chance to play our best at the end of this process, and rest is a tremendous part. Staying healthy is a tremendous part of it. And, exercise is a huge thing. Even if you're not a huge exerciser, walking is great. It is a part of letting the mind have its time away from this thing to digest whatever we've input. Thoughts on how to address lapses of intonation? Is that weakness neuroses for you? What sort of goals and steps would you take? Look, I think that, Matt, those things can be things that are unveiled as a lack of the build process for you, of what you're bringing to it in the end. If that's what's falling apart when you're under pressure, then yeah, you've got to figure out a very specific regimen for addressing them as you continue to march. But it's just one of the things, I would say that unfortunately, intonation falling apart is one of the things that a committee notices earliest, but I wouldn't say that it's more of a failing than your bounce falling apart or not working when we're talking about this process of you wrangling everything you're bringing to the bass and working it through. And so in the end, it can be the mind's manifestation of stress, certainly, and you'd need to address it that way if that's what you're finding as you get more and more and more under pressure. It can also be that you haven't taken steps in the first place to be as solid in that area as you can, and that there are things that you can do to organize your hands and organize your body to help with that in the future. And digging in on the specifics of that is a big question, but it is addressable, and I'm happy to talk some other time about the specifics of how to impact specifically intonation and those things. But I think you just want to know, like, is this my basic problem, or is this a way that my mind is affecting things when I'm under pressure? And then you can go from there in terms of making a specific plan. Look, we're just about at the end of an hour together here, and in the end, I wanted to show you guys what I've built in this prep, because I think that it is a manifestation, this prep that I'll be running for the Lyric and for the San Diego auditions. It's a manifestation of the ideas that I've been talking about, and I can show you how what I intend to cover with the people that decide to do it will serve each of the ideas that I've been trying to explain about. In the end, it's the build, prepare, deliver framework. The goal is for you to be delivering your musical goals to the best of your abilities on the day of an audition. That's all you can do. And I thought it was a really interesting comment made earlier about bringing the floor up. It really is about bringing the floor and the ceiling together and expecting that gap is going to be the place that you land no matter what the pressure are. That is the goal of what we're doing in a great audition prep. And we want you feeling confident, focused, and ready. And I specifically didn't use the word calm in there because I'm not sure how calm really works in these situations in the end. I think confidence and calmness are two very different things. And confidence is where that body prep and the conscious mind and the subconscious mind meet. That's where confidence really is. And in 8 weeks, what we can do is work through that initial 3 weeks really clearly and really strongly together immediately. The point will be to be front loading information for you guys that help you get to the answer to the question I just answered a moment ago, which is how do you make those specific decisions musically? And I have a set of excerpts. I have a set of music with bowings and fingerings for each of these excerpts. I'll be making videos that take you guys through anyone that wants to be part of this through each excerpt so that I can outline what I believe the musical goals are in there and how specifically you can use your technique to access each of those so that we're defining that bullseye really, really clearly, really early in the process, and that you have access to those videos on the front end more quickly than you might if you were taking lessons. I think a big part of the problem when you're taking weekly lessons is that you go in there, you dig in on 3 excerpts, you get 3 amazing game plans for them, and you work through your specific technical issues inside them. But it's 7 days until you're there again working through the next 3 excerpts. And what you really need is all of that context plus the 3 next excerpts the next day so that you can make that kind of progress on there. And so front loading information that's available by going through them in group time together each week in group masterclasses together, and also in videos that I'll be supplementing throughout those first 3 weeks, making on my own time and making sure that they're there for you guys to access, I think is a really big part of getting through the first part of prepare so that you're up on your feet and we can turn when we want to the mocks and to the preparation of the mind for all of this. So we've got the front-loaded resources of the thing. We're going to be meeting in a group masterclass setting where we're talking about the excerpts. There will be opportunities for people to do some playing inside of those things. There will be opportunities for me to demonstrate and take questions, but we're going to be working through the material more quickly than if I were seeing you in once-a-week lessons. You will also have the opportunity inside it to submit videos each week, up to 3 videos each week for my review. So I will go over them and get back to you in terms of what I'm hearing and what I think could be better, and weighing your personal playing against what we've been going through in terms of setting those goals. In terms of individual coaching sessions, every other week we'll get together for 20 minutes, talk about your specific questions that you might not feel comfortable with inside of the group, maybe do some playing, whatever you want to spend 20 minutes doing, we'll dig in together very specifically. And we will also spell out with you a timeline for when these mocks need to happen. We'll talk about exactly who you want to be populating your mocks for. We'll be talking about how they're going and what's going on, making sure that you are staying on schedule for this thing as you get through the 8-week prep. So there's complete support for you throughout the whole thing. You've got information that you can refer back to from the recorded masterclasses and the videos that I'll supplement them with, and you've got time to check in and talk about your specific issues all the way along. I'm going to do it with a maximum of 12 students, and I have a number of people signed up already for it. But I think any bigger than that and the amount of time that I want to give to each person individually isn't going to be there. I don't think it really matters how few there are in the end, nearly as much, because, addressing people's individual issues and things just becomes a little bit more possible in that situation. But the thing that you lose out on in there is the group accountability, which I think is super important in these situations. You got to have someone next to you who's trying their butt off so that when you're tired and sick of working on these things, you see them over there working and you get back up on your horse and you get back on. And I think that's something that's missing for so many people once they leave the college studio situation. Having a little bit of accountability in there and feeling like you're working with another group of people along this road is actually tremendously important. I think there's a lot of answers that flow through group accountability as well. It's a tremendously important part of becoming fluent in your audition prep. The 8-week course for the standard set that we just talked about is $1,750. It's more hours than I can give at a reduced rate for my hourly teaching, and I just think that it gives you a set of support items that I couldn't deliver otherwise. I'll also be adding a premium tier to that where you can have 3 private lessons along the way during your prep. And we can schedule those according to where you feel they're most important. If it's in the build phase and you want to talk strokes and specific technical things, that's fine. If it's towards the end where you need another mock and we can dig in and see how you're doing as you run the list, totally fine. Any way you want to spend those 3 lessons over the course of the 8 weeks, we're there for you. And so that's $2,250. And that takes you from A to Z on this thing. There are payment plans available if any of that is an issue. I don't want issues with that to keep people from accessing the process. In the end, I believe the process is what has allowed me to compete so successfully in so many of the auditions I've taken. I don't have very many that haven't at least gotten to a certain point of success. And it really was a question over time at school, falling on my face and figuring this out and learning about the right pace of that having that conversation with the mind and the body and informing these things. And I'm just excited to walk some more people through it. I've had great results with the students that have taken the time to implement it. It takes discipline. It is not for everyone. It is not for people who are just interested in trying to take another audition and see where they get. It's for the people that want to know, look, this is my default future. This is where I will land with my next audition if I don't change anything about my prep, versus people who are saying, look, this is where I'm consistently getting in my auditions. It's getting a little better because I've got more experience each time I take it, but I know that there is still a gap between what I'm delivering in the finals or at the end of my round and what I knew I wanted to deliver in that moment. This is specifically designed to address that. I will forward on to all of you guys an email with just some information, link to this site so you guys can check it out and see if it's right for you. Next steps for anybody that wants to join is just schedule a conversation. There will be a link in there. You can schedule a conversation. You are welcome to schedule a conversation with me, no matter what, whether this is something that interests you or not. I'm always happy to talk shop. I'm always happy to be a resource for anybody that wants to engage. So I'll send emails along to everybody that signed up today. Super pleased that everybody came out and spent their time on this. If there's any questions anybody has, I'm happy to stick around and keep chatting a little bit, whatever you guys want. But thank you for being here and thanks for giving me your time. And I hope it was informative in some way, benefits you in your next audition.